Welcome back to the channel, and today we are diving into one of the wildest, most mysterious, and most controversial stories in American financial history. A story involving trillions of dollars, hidden vaults, missing gold, digital currencies, secret government motives, and why countries like Russia and China are suddenly panicking and buying gold. A pattern that has repeated itself throughout history, every time an empire reaches the edge of its financial limits. This is the story of America's missing gold and what could be the biggest economic cover-up in modern history. And yes, it connects directly to stablecoins, Bitcoin, the debt crisis, and why some world leaders think the United States is planning a reset. So, sit tight, because what I am about to explain will change the way you look at money forever. So, let us start with the biggest question of all. What happened to America's gold? Because official records say the United States is supposed to have over 100 tons of physical gold sitting safely in vaults across the country. Places like Fort Knox, West Point, Denver, and the New York Fed's underground vault. But here is the problem. Even when the public begged for an audit, when politicians asked for an audit, when citizens filed FOIA requests, the government kept saying the same thing every time. Everything is fine. Trust us. No need to check. Which is strange because if everything was fine, why not just open the vaults for one modern, full audit? That silence created a vacuum. And whenever there is a vacuum, the world fills it with theories. And some of those theories are not as crazy as they sound. Because historically, governments have lost gold, misreported gold, and even used gold secretly to finance wars or stabilize collapsing currencies. We have seen this in France, in Britain, in Germany, and during World War II. So pretending America is magically immune to any of this is ridiculous. But here is where the story gets bizarre. Over the last decade, something strange began happening globally. Countries quietly started requesting their gold back from the United States. Germany asked for theirs. Turkey asked for theirs. Poland, Hungary, Austria, Venezuela, the Netherlands, one by one. Countries demanded physical gold to be shipped back to their own borders. Why would they do that unless they feared the system was unstable, and at the same time, the United States stopped allowing deep, independent audits? Everything became locked behind classified documentation and restricted access. And when officials were allowed into vaults, they were not allowed to test the bars. They were not allowed to randomly sample them. They were only allowed to look. But now, here is where the missing gold theory intersects with the modern financial crisis. Because even though we talk about the 100 tons of gold as if it is the ultimate foundation of American strength, the reality is the U.S. does not run on gold anymore. It runs on debt, $37 trillion of it. And if you understand how governments historically escape impossible debt loads, you already know the answer. They do it by devaluing the currency. And that is exactly what Russia's presidential advisor warned about at the Eastern Economic Forum. He said the United States is preparing to use crypto and stablecoins to shift its massive debt into a digital layer, a crypto cloud. And once the world is inside that system, the U.S. could inflate, manipulate, or rewrite the rules, and the rest of the world would be stuck with the consequences. Because if the US devalues the dollar, then the real cost of its debt melts away, and everyone holding dollars, treasuries, or digital dollars pays the price through inflation. So, why does gold matter here? Because gold is the only thing the United States cannot print, cannot inflate, and cannot replace with a stable coin. If the US truly has its full gold reserves, the government has a nuclear option. They could revalue gold overnight like they did under Roosevelt in the 1930s and reset the system. But if the gold is not really there, or if the amount is much smaller than reported, then America cannot afford a gold-based reset. And that would force it to choose a different path, a digital path, a stablecoin path, a Bitcoin adjacent path. And that is exactly what some financial insiders believe is happening, slowly, quietly, indirectly. Not by the government buying Bitcoin outright, but by allowing private companies to accumulate massive positions. MicroStrategy, for example, hundreds of thousands of Bitcoin owned by one US-based public corporation. So what if one day the US government simply takes a strategic stake in it, the same way it took ownership positions in Intel or major banks? Suddenly, the United States would have indirect control of a huge Bitcoin reserve without ever making an official purchase. And while that is happening on the crypto side, the stablecoin industry is expanding globally at a pace that almost feels coordinated. Billions of dollars in circulation backed by short-term US treasuries, meaning every time a stablecoin grows, demand for US debt grows. Meaning stablecoin holders around the world become unofficial sponsors of America's borrowing. Meaning inflation in the US gets exported globally like a silent tax. And this is exactly why countries around the world are running back to gold. They do not trust this digital system. They already saw what happened in 1971 when the US promised dollars were redeemable for gold, then cut the link with a single announcement. They know if it happened once, it can happen again. So is America hiding missing gold? Is there a cover-up? Because the real story might not be about bars missing from a vault. The real story might be that gold is becoming irrelevant in the eyes of the U.S. government, that the monetary future will be built on digital assets the government can influence, regulate, or indirectly own, while the rest of the world desperately tries to anchor itself back to the oldest form of money humans ever trusted. And here is the part the world is not ready to accept. Gold might not be missing. It might simply be replaced, slowly, quietly, strategically, not with a CBDC, not with a government Bitcoin purchase, but with something much more subtle, a digital dollar network built through stablecoins, a Bitcoin reserve built through corporations, a new system that looks private but eventually becomes public, a reset without ever announcing a reset. If that is true, then America's missing gold is not a mystery. It is the first chapter in the biggest monetary shift in modern history. If you enjoyed this deep dive, smash the like button, subscribe if you haven't already, and tell me in the comments, do you think America still has all its gold, or is something happening behind the scenes? I would love to hear your theories. Thanks for watching. Take care, and I will see you in the next video.